Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. Read by Sav Reeds. Chapter 5. I Play Pinnacle with a Horse. I had weird dreams full of barnyard animals. Most of them wanted to kill me. The rest wanted food. I must have woken up several times, but what I heard and saw made no sense, so I just passed out again. I remember lying in a soft bed, being spoon-fed something that tasted like buttered popcorn, only it was pudding. The girl with the curly blonde hair hovered over me, smirking as she scraped drips off my chin with a spoon. When she saw my eyes open, she asked, "What will happen at the summer solstice?" I managed to croak, "What?" She looked around, as if afraid someone were over here. "What's going on? What was stolen? We've only got a few weeks." "I'm sorry," I mumbled. Someone knocked on the door, and the girl quickly filled my mouth with pudding. The next time I woke up, the girl was gone. A husky blonde dude, like a surfer, stood in the corner of the room watching over me. He had blue eyes, at least a dozen of them, on his cheek, on his forehead, and his back of his hands. When I finally came around for good, there was nothing weird about my surroundings, except they were nicer than I was used to. I was sitting in a deck chair on a huge porch, gazing across the meadow at the green hills in the distance. The breeze smelled like strawberries. There was a blanket over my legs and pillow behind my neck. All that was great, but my mouth felt like a scorpion had been using it for a nest. My tongue was dry and nasty, and every one of my teeth hurt. On the table next to me was a tall drink. It looked like iced apple juice with a green straw and a paper parasol stuck through a maraschino cherry. My hand was so weak I almost dropped the glass once my fingers got around it. "Careful," a familiar voice said. Grover was leaning against the porch railing, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. Under one arm, he carried a little shoebox. He was wearing blue jeans, Converse high tops, and a bright orange t-shirt that said, "Camp Half-Blood." Just plain old Grover, not the goat boy. So maybe I had a nightmare. Maybe my mom was okay. We were still on vacation. We stopped here at the big house for some reason. And "You saved my life," Grover said. Least I could do. I went back to the hill. I thought you might want this." Reverently, he placed the shoebox in my lap. Inside was a black and white bull's horn, the base jagged from being broken off, the tip splattered with dry blood. It hadn't been a nightmare. "The Minotaur," I said. Percy, it isn't a good idea." "That's what they call it in Greek myths, isn't it?" I demanded. "The Minotaur, half man, half bull." Grover shifted uncomfortably. "You've been out for 2 days. How much do you remember?" "My mom, is she really—" He looked down. I stared across the meadow. There was groves of trees, winding stream, acres of strawberries spread out under the blue sky. The valley was surrounded by rolling hills, and the tallest one, directly in front of us, was the one with the huge pine tree on top. Even that looked beautiful in the sunlight. My mother was gone. The whole world should be black and cold. Nothing should look beautiful. "I'm sorry," Grover sniffled. "I'm a failure. I'm the worst satyr in the world." He moaned, stomping his foot so hard it came off. The Converse high top came off. Inside was filled with styrofoam except for the hood-shaped hole. "Oh, sticks," he mumbled. Thunder rolled across the clear sky. As he struggled to get his hoof back on the fake foot, I thought, well, that settles it. Grover was a satyr. I was ready to bet that if I shaved his curly brown hair, I'd find tiny horns on his head. But I was too miserable to care that satyrs existed, or even minotaurs. All that meant was that my mother really had been squeezed into nothingness, dissolved into yellow light. I was alone, an orphan. I would have to live with Smelly Gabe? No, that would never happen. I would live on the streets first. I would pretend I was 17 and join the army. I'd do something. Grover was still sniffling. The poor kid, poor goat, satyr, whatever, looked as if he expected to be hit. I said, "It wasn't your fault." "Yes, it was. I was supposed to protect you." "Did my mother ask you to protect me?" "No, but that's my job. I'm a keeper. At least, I was." "But why—" Suddenly felt dizzy, my vision swimming. "Don't strain yourself," Grover said. "Here." He helped me hold my glass and put the straw on my lips. I recoiled at the taste because I was expecting apple juice. It wasn't that at all. It was chocolate chip cookies. Liquid cookies. Not just any cookies. My mom's homemade blue chocolate chip cookies. Buttery and hot, with the chips still melting. Drinking it, my whole body felt warm and good, full of energy. My grief didn't go away, but I felt as if my mom had just brushed her hand against my cheek and given me a cookie the way that she used to when I was small, and told me everything was going to be okay. Before I knew it, I drained the glass. I stared into it, sure I just had a warm drink, but the ice cubes hadn't even melted. Was it good? Grover asked. I nodded. What did it taste like? He sounded so wistful, and I felt guilty. Sorry, I said. I should have let you taste. His eyes widened. No, that's not what I meant. I just wondered. Chocolate chip cookies, I said. My mom's. Homemade. He sighed. And how do you feel? Like I could throw Nancy Boba Fett 100 meters. That's good, he said. That's good. I don't think you should risk drinking any more of that stuff. What do you mean? He took the empty glass from me gingerly, as if it were dynamite, and set it back on the table. Come on. Kyron and Mr. D are waiting. The porch wrapped all the way around the farmhouse. My legs felt wobbly, trying to walk that far. Grover offered to carry the minotaur horn, but I held on to it. I'd paid for that souvenir the hard way. I wasn't going to let it go. As we came around the opposite end of the house, I caught my breath. We must have been on the north shore of Long Island, because on this side of the house, the valley marched all the way up to Long Island Sound, which glittered about a mile in the distance. Between here and there, I simply couldn't process everything I was seeing. The landscape was dotted with buildings that looked like ancient Greek architecture, an open-air pavilion, an amphitheater, a circular arena, except they all looked brand new, their white marble columns sparkling in the sun. In a nearby sandpit, a dozen high school-aged kids and satyrs played volleyball. Canoes glided across the small lake. Kids in bright orange t-shirts like Grover's were chasing each other around a cluster of cabins nestled in the woods. Some shot targets at an archery range. Others rode horses down the wooded trail, and, unless I was hallucinating, some of those horses had wings. Down at the end of the porch, two men sat across from each other at a card table. A blonde-haired girl who'd spoon-fed me with popcorn-flavored pudding was leaning on the porch rail next to them. The man facing me was small but porky. He had a red nose, big watery eyes, and curly hair so black it was almost purple. He looked like those paintings of baby angels. What do you call them? Hubbubs? No, cherubs. That's it. He looked like a cherub who turned middle-aged in a trailer park. He wore a tiger-patterned Hawaiian shirt, and he would have fit right in at one of Gabe's poker parties, except I got the feeling this guy could have outgambled even my stepfather. That's Mr. D, Grover muttered to me. He's the camp director. Be polite. That girl? That's Annabeth Chase. She's just a camper, but she's here longer than just about anybody. And you already know Kyron. He pointed at the guy whose back was to me. At first I realized he was sitting in a wheelchair. Then I recognized the tweed jacket, the thinning brown hair, the scraggly beard. Mr. Bruner! I cried. The Latin teacher turned and smiled. His eyes had that mischievous glint that they sometimes got in class when he pulled a pop quiz and made all the multiple choice answers B. Ah, good. Percy, he said. Now we have 4 for Pinnacle. He offered me a chair to the right of Mr. D, who looked at me with bloodshot eyes, and heaved a great sigh. Oh, I suppose I must say it. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. There. Now don't expect me to be glad to see you. Thanks? I scooted a little farther away from him, because if there was one thing I had learned about living with Gabe, it was how to tell when an adult has been hitting the happy juice. If Mr. D was a stranger to alcohol, I was a satyr. Annabeth, Mr. Bruner called to the blonde girl. She came forward, and Mr. Bruner introduced us. This young lady nursed you back to health, Percy. Annabeth, my dear, why don't you go check on Percy's bunk? We'll be putting him in cabin 11 for now. Annabeth said, Sure, Kyron. She was probably my age, maybe a couple of centimeters taller, and a whole lot of athletic looking. With her deep tan and curly blonde hair, she was almost exactly what I thought a stereotypical California girl would have looked like, except her eyes ruined the image. They were a startling gray, like storm clouds, pretty but intimidating too. As if she were analyzing the best way to take me down in a fight. She glanced at the minotaur horn in my hands, then back at me. I imagined she was going to say, "You killed a minotaur?" or "Wow, you're so awesome," or something like that. Instead, she said, "You drool when you sleep." Then she sprinted off down the lawn, her blonde hair flying behind her. "So," I said, anxious to change the subject, "you, work here, Mr. Bruner?" "Not Mr. Bruner," the ex-Mr. Bruner said. "I'm afraid that was my pseudonym. You could call me Chiron." "Okay." Totally confused, I looked at the director. "And Mr. D, does that stand for something?" Mr. D stopped shuffling the cards. He looked at me like I just belched loudly. "Young man, names are powerful things. You don't just go around using them for no reason." "Oh, right. Sorry." "I must say, Percy," Chiron Bruner broke in, "I'm glad to see you alive. It's been a long time since I made a house call to a potential camper. I'd hate to think I've wasted my time." "House call?" "My year at Yancey Academy to instruct you. We've had sagers at most schools, of course, keeping a lookout, but Grover alerted me as soon as he met you. He sensed you were something special, so I decided to come upstate. I convinced the other Latin teacher to, take a leave of absence." I tried to remember the beginning of the school year. It seemed like so long ago, but I did have a fuzzy memory of there being another Latin teacher my first week at Yancey. Then, without explanation, he had disappeared, and Mr. Bruner had taken the class. "You came to Yancey to teach me?" I asked. Chiron nodded. "Honestly, I wasn't sure about you at first. We contacted your mother, let her know we were keeping an eye out on you, just in case you were ready for Camp Half-Blood. But you still had so much to learn. Nevertheless, you made it here alive, and that's always the first test." "Grover," Mr. D said impatiently, "are you playing or not?" "Yes, sir." Miss Grover trembled as he took the fourth chair, though I didn't know why he should be so afraid of a pudgy little man with a tiger print Hawaiian shirt. "You do know how to play pinnacle." Mr. D eyed me suspiciously. "I'm afraid not," I said. "I'm afraid not, sir," he said. "Sir," I repeated. I was liking the lecture less and less. "Well," he told me, "it is, along with gladiator fighting and Pac-Man, one of the greatest games ever invented by humans. I would expect all civilized young men to know the rules." "I'm sure the boy can learn," Chiron said. "Please," I said, "what is this place? What am I doing here? Chiron, why would you go to Yancey Academy just to teach me?" Mr. D snorted. "I asked the same question." The camp director dealt the cards. Grover flinched every time one landed in his pile. Chiron smiled at me sympathetically the way he used to in Latin class, as if to let me know that no matter what my average was, I was the star student, and he expected me to have the right answer. "Percy," he said,